Let's talk this through by speaking with the Global Affairs Analyst, Kelvin Dark, who is joining me from Washington, D.C. via Skype for more insight. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelvin. Let me begin by asking you about what you think about the agreement on a framework for firearms safety, the safety bill, which has enough Republican support to advance in the narrowly divided Senate.
Well, I think that the first thing that comes to my mind is what are the actual reforms being proposed? And to me, I consider it more like a slight tinkering around the edges. So, we have to measure expectations when we call these reforms. Just kind of like the major high points is there are incentives for red flag laws, which, allow local police to take someone's gun away if they believe they're a threat. But once again, this doesn't propose having red flag laws, only incentivizing states to enact them. So obviously states where the population don't agree with it, they're not going to go in for it anyway. One of the other things that has been touted is the enhanced background checks, but that's only up until the age of 21, so that people between 18 and 21 will have a enhanced background check. But let's keep in mind, it doesn't even stop people under 21 from 18 to 21 from buying the same weapons that were used in these attacks. Two things of the proposed legislation I do think are very positive is one, it does provide funding for mental health assistance, which is very needed, as well as school safety, although we got to make sure we don't go too far. We don't want our schools looking like prisons or like the airport. And they closed the boyfriend loophole, whereas before you were protected if you had a spouse, a domestic partner that had a gun, you could have it taken away if they were threats. Didn't extend to boyfriends or girlfriends, but now it does. So those, I wouldn't call them reforms, but those are kind of what's being laid out, and the two that I think are positive.
Thing is that the plan includes support for state red flag laws, keeping firearms from potentially dangerous people, tougher criminal background checks for gun buyers under the age of 21. But what are the assurances that someone who is above 21 can also not use these weapons dangerously?
There's no assurance. It's no assurance for the people under 21, because keep in mind, one of the things that Democrats and gun reform advocates had been pressing for were enhanced background checks, period. There's still sales of guns in this country that are illegal where you don't have to go through a background check, which is absolutely crazy. One of the things, too, that I want to make sure I mention so that we can get these reforms into perspective is nothing has happened yet. It is a small step. Our Congress in this country has a long reputation for proposing frameworks, as they call it, that end up dying without even coming to a vote. This is an election year in this country, and summer recess is about to start. So if something doesn't happen before the 4th of July, I could easily see this going the same way as other frameworks and proposals in the past that were never actually voted on.
Well, even though this agreement has been praised as an important breakthrough, do you think it's enough to be able to attract enough votes to pass in both the Senate and House of Representatives?
That remains to be seen, and I think that there are two factors to keep in mind with that. One is in the House, every member of Congress, every member of the House of Representatives is up for election and re-election this year. As long as Democrats stay together, they have enough to pass it in the House, just barely by a few votes. And when it comes to the Senate, this is where I want to remind people that this isn't some courageous big step by the Republicans to finally supporting gun control, because of the 10 Republicans that signal they would be for the legislation, 4 of them, I believe, are retiring, and none of them are facing voters this year. So it's hardly a profile in courage. And like I said, they've only signaled their support of this framework. We've yet to see what the legislation actually includes.
Yeah, well, Calvin, before I let you go, looks like Americans are really torn between saving lives and protecting the constitutional right of carrying a gun. Does it appear to you that there can be a balance?
I think there can be a balance. I think that there is common sense gun reform legislation that's been out there, has been proposed. But you have a particular party, Republican Party, and a very powerful gun lobby that has already shot down this small step as saying it's a bridge too far. So I'm not optimistic that that will change, but I'm hoping that as we have our elections this year and as we continue to have elections coming up in 2024, that voters will vote for those who can support common sense gun legislation that makes our country safer and respects our Constitution.
Well, it remains to be seen where this would definitely swing at the end of the day. Global Affairs Analyst Kelvin Dark, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.